أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Reflections on the Risale-i Nur by Bediuzzaman Said Nursi podcast series. This is Mustafa Tuna. You can listen to the episodes of this series wherever you get your podcasts or at the website www.reflections-rn.org, as those who are watching this on YouTube instead of listening on the podcast can see on the screen. That is the website where we store all of our recordings and texts that accompany our recordings too. And inshallah, this episode will also be provided in the video format on YouTube. You can go to the same website and click the link to the video and watch it from there. Or on YouTube, you can go to the channel Reflections RN. It would be much appreciated if you subscribe to either the video channel or the podcast. That gives me an understanding of how much how many people are following out there, inshallah. Okay. Since we started to record videos too, we went back to the very beginning of this podcast series where we had done an introduction about who Bediuzzaman Said Nursi is. We did a longer version of that, and you can access that in 4 videos or 4 podcasts now. And in this episode, inshallah, we will look into what the Risale-i Nur is, the magnum opus of Bediuzzaman Said Nursi. We are going to try to understand, have an understanding of what it is that Bediuzzaman Said Nursi wrote, and that has been of so much benefit to the Ummah since the beginning of the, let's say, around the 20th century, mashallah. All right, what is the Risale-i Nur? The Risale-i Nur is a Quranic commentary. It is a book of haqiqah, and the Qur'an is the description and elucidation of the creator of reality, right? Of the reality to those who have understanding. So God, of course, God is reality too, but then if you refer to the created reality, God is the creator of all reality, right? And in the Quran, He gives us a manual of the reality. What is it here for? What do we do with it? And what is our purpose in it? And so on and so forth. All of these questions, we have answers to them in the Quran. And the Risale-i Nur is a commentary on the Quran. And as a commentary on the Quran, it is a book of reality as reality is. But, we can add things to this. It is a Quranic commentary that makes substantial contributions to the Islamic tradition. So it stands in the Islamic tradition. Within the Islamic tradition, it comes at the more or less the end of the Islamic tradition. If we, think that this has started, with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions and the followers of them and the followers of the followers in the, say, 7th, 8th centuries and on. And Bediuzzaman Said Nursi lived in the 14th century of Islam, or late 19th, early 20th centuries. The work he produced comes toward the ends of the Islamic tradition and takes into account the entire tradition and makes substantial contributions to it. Now, especially, I wrote here, in the fields of kalam, which can be translated as dialectical theology or speculative theology. None of these are perfect. but we have to have something. But we can also say kalam. It makes an important contribution in the field of kalam and tasawwuf, Sufism. Now, when I say kalam, we should be careful about that, and there will be more in this presentation, inshallah, about this subject. Kalam usually is a reactive process. There are questions out there, there are challenges to faith, there are challenges to the principles of religion, and then those who are steeped in this tradition, those who know the tradition, the Qur'an, the Sunnah, and the commentaries on them very well, take the challenge, meet the challenge, and respond to it with rational argumentation. This sometimes may be problematic because if you are reading a book of kalam and you are not exposed to the challenges that are out there, you don't really need to know those responses. It doesn't really matter. There were some challenges, say in the 8th century, 9th century, 10th century. You can read pages and pages about them in the books of kalam, and it will not even make sense to you because you are not familiar with the challenge, and those are not the challenges of the times that we live in. Right? There are new challenges, and there need to be new responses, and Bediuzzaman Said Nursi provides those new responses to the new challenges. So in that sense, it's a contribution to the field of or discipline of kalam in the Islamic tradition. But as different from most kalam books, it does not expose you to the problems and challenges in detail. It does not describe the challenge out there before providing an answer to it, so that it doesn't expose you to it, right? It provides you the answers. It provides you the it provides you reality, and therefore when you are faced with a challenge that becomes a challenge because it has strayed away from reality, you know what reality is, and you have the answers to that challenge, answers to that question, but you are not necessarily exposed to the challenge. And in that sense, the Risale-i Nur is a safe book, right? According to Imam Ghazali, it is not permissible for some people to read kalam books because they don't have those problems, those suspicions. They have not been exposed to the questions. Why expose them by putting those questions, problems, and problematics in front of them, right? So in that sense, the Risale-i Nur is not a kalam book, but it makes important contributions to kalam. Well, it makes important contributions to Sufism too, and this is too broad a subject for me to be able to explain in detail. To understand that, one should listen to everything we have provided in this episode, because everything that Bediuzzaman Said Nursi has written has aspects that should contribute to one's spiritual journey and progress and improvement, and the larger literature about this, the larger literature about Sufism, and the description of Gnostics, those who have realized reality as reality is, their descriptions of what the reality out there is. And of course, this oftentimes requires metaphorical expressions. It cannot be precise because for the average human being, the point of reference is this world, and this is about something that's beyond this world. But at any rate, these are really important. There are really important contributions to the disciplines of kalam and tasawwuf in the Risale-i Nur. But also, we should add to that it offers important insights about the methodologies, usul, right, of the sciences of Quranic exegesis, tafsīr, and prophetic traditions, hadīth, and in some places to a lesser extent probably about usul al-fiqh as well, the methodology of Islamic jurisprudence as well. Now, this Quranic commentary, the Risale-i Nur, was written by Bediuzzaman Said Nursi, who lived 1877-78 to 1960. And once again, we have a quite detailed analyses, reflection upon his the story of his life in four about 1 hour video episodes. Those who are interested in learning more about Bediuzzaman Said Nursi should, inshallah, listen to those episodes or watch those episodes. So the Risale-i Nur is a Quranic commentary written by Bediuzzaman Said Nursi, who was a great scholar of the 14th century of the Islamic calendar. So we will provide a very brief outline of his who Bediuzzaman Said Nursi was here. He was born in 1878 or possibly 1877 in the Kurdish regions of the Ottoman Empire, today Southeast Anatolia. He received his initial training there in the local Islamic seminaries, that is madrasas, before going on to become one of the most learned, insightful, and respected scholars of the Ottoman Empire. He was appointed to the top institute of Islamic scholarship in the empire at some point in his life. But then when the Turkish Republic replaces the Ottoman Empire in the 1920s, the ruling elite of the new republic turned against religion, and as part of that process that they exiled Nursi, Bediuzzaman Said Nursi, or Ustad Nursi as his students refer to him, teacher Nursi, or teaching master Nursi, to a remote village in western Turkey. And they condemned him to a life of persecution, basically until his death in 1960. They cannot find legal reasons to execute him, but they actually poisoned him several times throughout his life too. They just can't get rid of him, I would say, because he had a duty to fulfill, and that duty was given to him by God, and God was protecting him, right? Anyway, he manages to write this magnum opus, which is the Risale-i Nur Külliyat, or the compendium of the epistles of light, in this period, while he is being persecuted, confined to small villages, small towns, imprisoned, being tried in court under police scrutiny. During this period, under really hard conditions, he writes this book. He could write, of course, but his handwriting was not very good, and he wrote very slowly. So most of the time he needed somebody to dictate the treatises that made the Risale-i Nur. And as we said, there is a duty that is given by God, and he who gives the duty provides the means for its fulfillment too. Despite all those hardships, he had students around him who would take note of what he was saying. He could dictate to them. So he would often dictate his teachings in the form of small treatises to the members of a small circle of devoted students who braved persecution with him. The first court trial that they were all taken together, there were more than 150 people detained and then tried in this trial. His students would then hand copy the treatises of the Risale-i Nur. So something comes, it's usually there's some level of inspiration that comes as a result of his preparedness, of course. And he says to his students, write. And oftentimes there's someone who is ready with pen and paper, takes the pen and paper and writes quickly, and then that person would then go and prepare a clean copy of that, and then they would start to distribute this. Whoever is interested would take the clean copy and copy it and then move on. His students would hand copy the treatises of the Risale-i Nur secretly and spread them secretly throughout Turkey, and this led to a network of distribution. Only in the 1950s, eventually, like he was exiled in the 1920s, 1950s, the Turkish state relaxes its grip on religion to some extent and allows Nursi to publish his works openly in print. Until then, it is all hand copied and distributed through manuscripts. And according to some observation of a prosecutor who prosecuted Nursi at the end of the 1940s, there were about 600,000 hand-copied pieces of the Risale-i Nur. We are not talking about full books, but treatises within books. About 600,000 hand-copied pieces of the Risale-i Nur all around the country. MashaAllah. And this is all happening underground, But in the 1950s, they allow him to print these works openly, and since then, since the 1950s, when it was first first became possible to publish the Risale-i Nur, works of the Risale-i Nur, it has been translated into dozens of languages, more than 40, certainly more than 40, close to 50, dozens of languages, and it has inspired millions of Muslims in both Turkey and throughout the world, from Indonesia to America and Canada, from Mexico to Russia, although they are banned in Russia, in Russian translation, but the Turkish originals are still possible to read. And despite the ban, there is so much benefit in this that people brave the ban and read it. It has inspired millions of Muslims around the world. It has been the means for the hidayah, guidance of thousands of people around the world, and help millions of people to preserve their faith, mashallah. So it's a very important book of irshad too, right? Like a book of providing right guidance to humanity and to believers, mashallah. So what is in the Risale-i Nur? Said Nursi compiled his treatises into 4 major books, and these are the beginning and the core of the Risale-i Nur. And these books are named Sözler, which can be translated as the words. So it's composed of 33 treatises, and Ustad Nursi called each treatise a word. So the first word, second word, third word, fourth word. This was written early 1926 through mid-1930s. And then chronologically, he writes mektubat, or the letters. And these are usually, again, treatises, again, 33 of them. And they were usually written in response to questions that Ustad Nursi's students asked him, like questions about major issues of the ilm of haqiqah, the knowledge of reality. And most of them actually were asked by one particular student, Hulusi Yahyagil. And then again, chronologically, but this is not a very precise order. Sometimes there could be one letter written before and one flash. But in general, chronologically, there come the lama'alar, the flashes. And these are also written mostly between 1926 to mid-1930s. And then shu'alar, the rays. So these are the 4 major books in the compendium. These 4 books constitute the main body of the Risale-i Nur, right? But it's not all that. The total number of books that you will find if you go to a bookstore as in the compendium, in the Kulliyat compendium of the Risale-i Nur is more than that. 12, 13, sometimes 14 books will be included, right? So what are the other books? These constitute the main body of the Risale-i Nur, along with Nursi's correspondence with his students. That's very important. There are 3 major books that come out of this correspondence. So the Risale-i Nur was not only about elucidation of the realities under the guidance of the Qur'an, but also about guidance, practical guidance on a day-to-day basis about how to understand those realities, how to practice them in life, how to spread the word, right? All of these things are included in these letters, correspondence that Ustad Nursi had with his students, and they are included in the Risale-i Nur as lahiqas or addenda. So there are 3 of them, but one of them is large, so it's in 2 volumes, so that makes 4 more volumes. What else? Oh, so it's correspondence with his students, and statements of defense in various court trials are also included in there. And then there is one authorized biography of Ustad Nursi that's included in the compendium. His students wanted to write this, and they wanted to go into great detail about his life, and there's a lot to be said about Bediuzzaman Said Nursi's life, and it can easily turn into hagiography. There are so many miraculous, extraordinary awe-inspiring happenings in his life. So they were focusing on these, but he suppresses them and he wants them to focus on the story of the production of the Risale-i Nur, basically. So that's mostly what is in the authorized biography of Bediuzzaman Said Nursi. And then two of his earlier works are included in the compendium. One of them is a Quranic exegesis of a commentary on the first chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Fatiha, and the first 33 verses of the second chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah. He wrote this commentary actually on the front line as he was fighting the invading Russian forces during World War I and commanding a regiment of voluntary paramilitary unit soldiers. And he intended it to be the first volume of an about 60 to 70 volume, complete exegesis of the Quran, focusing primarily on the Quran's eloquence, balagha. But things happened in ways that he could not predict at the time he started this work. He was wounded. He was taken as a prisoner of war to Russia. He did not have students to dictate around him. And then when he came back to Turkey, the Ottoman Empire was defeated. There was the resistance. He got involved in that resistance against occupying European forces. And then he was exiled. And when he was exiled, and the Turkish Republic, the ruling elite of the Turkish Republic turned against religion, and this was something that was actually spreading like wildfire around the world. Irreligiosity in the 20th century spread like wildfire in the 20th century. Its roots are in the much earlier and established, especially in the 19th century at an intellectual level, but then through public education, mass media, and so on and so forth, irreligiosity was spreading like wildfire in the 20th century. And it was dictated by the state in Turkey and the Soviet Union and some other places too. So seeing this, Bediuzzaman Said Nursi changes course, and instead of focusing on that, deeply scholarly work of the Quranic commentary, he writes this book of reality, again a Quranic commentary. It is based on the Quran too. The Risale-i Nur is commentary on about 600 verses from the Quran that are explicitly stated in the compendium, but then the commentary on those 600 verses are based on other verses too. So if one were to really carefully read, someone who knows the Quran very well and the hadith very well, if one were to carefully read the Risale-i Nur, one would probably be able to identify maybe all verses from the Quran and thousands of prophetic traditions in the Risale-i Nur. So at any rate, one of the books including the compendium of this commentary on Surah Al-Fatiha and the first 33 verses of the Surah Al-Baqarah, the first chapter of the Quran. And it provides an example of how a really powerful commentary can be written at our time. So it is, in a sense, it's a work in progress. It's waiting for he who will be able to continue the work, inshallah. So another one of those earlier works is Mathnavi al-Arabi al-Nuri, the Arabic Mathnavi of light. It is actually a collection of small treatises that Bediuzzaman Said Nursi wrote between 1919 through 1922 or so. And that is a really important period in his life because it seems he had his, probably one of his spiritual journeys during that period, similar to Imam Ghazali becoming a master at the Nizamiya madrasas and then not being able to teach any longer and seeking something higher and traveling and going through a spiritual journey and a period of awakening. That seems to be what was happening to Bediuzzaman Said Nursi in this period. And he had his intellect intact throughout his journey, and thanks to that he was taking notes to self. So the second earlier work and that's included in the compendium of the Risale-i Nur, is a collection of those notes to self, which was originally published in small treatises, but then put together originally in Arabic. All but a very small part of that collection is in Arabic originally. It is translated into Turkish, so if one were to go to Turkey and pull in a box a collection of the Risale-i Nur in Turkish, you will find a Turkish translation that was made by Bediuzzaman Said Nursi's brother. And by the way, the Quranic Commentary was also in Arabic originally, and it was also translated by his brother, but it is not a full translation. It was so profound that his brother decided to skip some parts because he thought he could not articulate it as well, or in the way that it deserves to be articulated. So he skipped some parts. But for those who know Arabic, that Mathnawi al-Arabi al-Nuri is a really important work that, in Bediuzzaman Said Nursi's words, constituted the nursery of the Risale-i Nur. So if the Risale-i Nur is a garden, an orchard of trees, fruit-bearing trees, the Mathnawi al-Arabi al-Nuri was its nursery where these ideas started to sprout, mashallah. And then a third earlier work sometimes included in the compendium, and it can be considered a book on the method of exegesis, and so on and so forth, right? So, but these are the major works that are included in the Risale-i Nur. In addition to this collection, we have one book that is collated from other parts of the Risale-i Nur, right? And a collection of inferred references to the Risale-i Nur from the Qur'an, as well as the poems of Ali radiallahu anh, the fourth caliph, the son-in-law and the cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. So Bediuzzaman Said Nursi looks at poems by Ali radiallahu anh and Abdul Qadir al-Jilani radiallahu anh and the Qur'an, and using the signs of abjad or jafr and looking at the meanings contained therein, he identifies references to the Risale-i Nur and the happenings of the 20th century. So we know that Ali radiallahu anh said that his knowledge would not increase if the veil of ghaib, the unseen, was lifted. So he was given the knowledge of things to come in the future too, based on, of course, only God knows the future, right? But there are indications of this placed in the Quran and in the cosmos. So based on those indications, he had an understanding of the generals of what was to come. And saints of God, prophets of God know the unseen to the extent that it is made known to them. So in those poems by Abdul Qadir Jilani too, there are indications, references, or signs to the happenings of the 20th century, and among those happenings to the Risale-i Nur as one of the major happenings of the 20th century. And I'm saying this with full assurance. The authoring of the Risale-i Nur was one of the major events of the 20th century or the 14th century of Islam. It is a groundbreaking commentary on the Quran, and there's nothing more important. There's nothing more important that has been revealed to humanity than the Quran. So a groundbreaking commentary on the Quran will of course be one of the major events of the age that it was written in. So that book is also included in the compendium. So altogether, these books amount to about 6,000 pages, maybe more, depending on what the font is. But usually it is printed in about 6,000 pages of print in Turkish. Now, Ustad Nursi's overall work also comprises other earlier treatises, other earlier works, including 2 on logic. And they are really profound works on the science of logic. Only experts will understand, and that was the point. At that time, in his earlier life, he was writing for scholars, for those who would provide guidance to the community, not the community itself, but those who would provide guidance to the community. But when that became impossible later on, when scholars were prevented from being able to preach, right, he then switches to books of direct guidance, irshad, in his life. One on algebra. He was a genius in that too. He wrote a book on algebra, but unfortunately we don't have it. It burned in a fire. One on physiognomy, which also burned. We don't have it, right? As well as several, rearrangements of the letters and treatises of the Risale-i Nur. And he also has lots of earlier works published in the periodical press of the Ottoman Empire from the earlier period. But what makes the Risale-i Nur, right, in his broader collection of works, what makes the Risale-i Nur are primarily the words, the letters, the flashes, the rays, and the addenda composed of his correspondence with his students, and statements in court trials, and so on and so forth. And to that we can add Mathnavi al-Arabi al-Nuri and the commentary on the first chapter of the Qur'an and the first 33 verses of the second chapter of the Qur'an. So this is more or less what is in the Risale-i Nur, mashallah. As we already mentioned a little bit, in the earlier part of his life, during the Ottoman era, Ustad Nursi wrote his most important works in Arabic. He was a scholar. He was using the scholarly language of this tradition. He was writing for scholars. In the Republican era, however, he wrote mostly in Turkish, addressing the predominantly uninitiated peasants and small townspeople around him. So he was exiled to a distant village and then to a small town, right? These are the people around him, and he's teaching them, right? And trying to preserve their faith and piety in an environment where government powers mobilize to undermine religion. Now, we should not say, well, government powers are not mobilizing to undermine religion now, and therefore this is not relevant to me. No, it cannot be. That cannot be further from truth, right? The government powers are not mobilized to undermine religion now, but those government powers were functioning within a broader trend in the world that, sometimes people define or name the age of secularity, right? The capitalist world that we are living in, especially the consumerism of the world that we are living in, the urban anonymity that we live in, the authority that science as an establishment, not science as knowledge, but science as an establishment has acquired, and the way that science has been configured, and what informs that science in a metaphysical sense, right? The way that entertainment addresses and corrupts our lower souls in the world that we live in. All of these are more powerful impediments than whatever that the Turkish government was doing in the early 20th century, impediments to our ability to preserve faith and piety, right? So this is an age. This is an age of, Ustad Nursi uses the word calamities and tribulations. Actually, he doesn't use the word. He has a dream, and in that dream, a congregation of, he said, like most important people, really important people. So I can imagine that the prophets and saints and so on and so forth were included in that congregation. They address him as a representative of the age of calamities and tribulations, or troubles and tribulations. This is that age, right? So preserving faith and piety in this age, at this time, is a great task, great challenge for all of us, and we need all the means that we can, all the help that we can in order to do that, right? And Risale-i Nur is a big help in that respect. So as a result, he was addressing these people, right? His later writings that are included in the Risale-i Nur follow a pedagogical order and style, right? Not high-level Arabic terminology and so on and so forth, but pedagogical order and style, rendering even the most complicated matters of religion or theology more or less understandable for Nursi's uninitiated audience. Now, that doesn't take away from the profundity of the matters that he is discussing. He is discussing profound matters. Oftentimes, he provides solutions to, centuries-old problems in the tradition and so on and so forth, right? But he was articulating it in a way that was understandable, accessible, intelligible for his uninitiated audience. However, the Risale-i Nur is also packed with profound insights and clarifications on all disciplines of Muslim thought and spirituality. Right? Muslim thought and spirituality. I mean, it takes the whole tradition. Ustad Nursi had absorbed, consumed, and digested the whole tradition. Somewhere he says that a true scholar should not give to his audience, regurgitated food, the word that birds give to their chicks, right? They chew the food and regurgitate it back to their chicks. It's not digested. It's not pure. It still needs to be processed and consumed. He says a true scholar gives to his students, to his audience, pure milk like sheep, right? Digested and purified milk. That's what he is doing, right? So it's packed with profound insights and clarifications on all disciplines. He had digested all disciplines, all the tradition. As such, it is deeply integrated into a long and blessed tradition of Islamic scholarship and has its ranks among the likes of Imam Ghazali's Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of religious sciences, Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi's Mathnavi, Ibn Ata'illah al-Iskandari's Hakam, and Imam Rabbani's Maktubat. So we need to place the Risale-i Nur, right, on the top of the shelf of, if you will, the Islamic tradition, right? These are all books that receive their light, that receive their guidance and inspiration from the Qur'an, from the prophetic traditions. They digested that light and refracted it onto their ages, onto their audiences, in a way to meet the challenges of their ages, in a way to respond to and provide solutions to the problems of their respective audiences. Sometimes they are timeless. They deal with such problems that those problems never go away, right? The problem of dealing with our lower souls, right? And they have aspects that are about these timeless problems, and therefore they are timeless. But then they sometimes have aspects that are in response to their particular circumstances, and they are less relevant. The Risale-i Nur is like that, like those books. It deals with timeless problems, timeless questions and issues, but it deals with them in a way that's going to make most sense to an audience of our times. So, on that top shelf of the Islamic tradition, the Risale-i Nur is not just an ordinary commentary on the Qur'an. It's not one among many. It is a masterpiece that is grounded firmly in the Qur'an, that affirms and provides evidence for the agreed upon aspects of the Islamic tradition. This is very important in order to understand where it stands in the tradition. It affirms and provides evidence for the agreed upon aspects of the Islamic tradition while offering reasonable solutions to matters of disputation and matters that become matters of disputation in our times, right? And that connects the Quran and prophetic teachings to a sound observation of the cosmos, that is observed reality. And this is also very important, because this is the empirical age. This is the age in which observation, experimentation, scientific discovery, and scientific exploration has become the authority in the minds of many people, right? And our interpretation of religion, right? Our thoughts, a system of thought based on that is inspired by the Quran and the message of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, needs to take that into consideration too, right? And we have the means for that, because the book, the Quran is a book that reflects that created reality out there, right? And therefore the cosmos and the Quran are two books that can be read and should be read side by side. And that is what especially the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, right? So the Risale-i Nur, in a sense, tries to revive that method, that approach of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or the approach that he instilled in his companions. It does not offer a verse-by-verse commentary from the first chapter of the Quran to the last. So sometimes, I'm saying, or everybody says, like, it is a commentary on the Quran, and because some people are familiar with these, more conventional commentaries that starts from chapter 1, goes all the way to the last chapter of the Quran, right? When they take the Risale-i Nur in their hands and start reading, they cannot really make sense of it, like, what kind of a commentary on is this, right? But it is a commentary. As I said, there are about 600 verses that are directly commented upon, and the explanations that are provided about those 600 verses are driven from the Quran too. But it's a different kind of commentary. It focuses on key concepts and messages of the Quran that are most relevant to the problems, concerns, and questions of the contemporary world. It is not the product of an effort to demonstrate the author's intellectual capacity to master and synthesize earlier scholarly works without a corresponding realization of truth with a capital T, right? It is not about Bediuzzaman Said Nursi memorizing the, 265 different commentaries that were written before him and synthesizing them and providing a synthesis of that work, right? That's also valuable, and there are works that are written in that manner. But this is a work that benefits from all that tradition, all those works that have been written before. And Bediuzzaman Said Nursi was a voracious reader, and he had a very sharp memory. He could keep most of what he read in his mind. He usually memorized books. He did not just read them, but memorized them. And he had a very sharp and fast intellect that could connect things very in creative ways, in meaningful ways. So he was a great synthesizer, right? But at the end of the day, this was all preparation for something higher, right? And that something higher, that thing that's higher is with that preparation, being able to expose oneself to the light illumination that's coming from the Quran and receiving that directly from the Quran, right? And that takes us to the Quran being a book that describes reality as reality is, and truth is knowledge that corresponds to reality, right? Therefore, it is a commentary that includes and reflects that realization of truth. And this is not the only commentary that does that, right? There, we can find other commentaries in the tradition too. And most scholars, to some extent, are doing this. So this is the prime task of a scholar. But Bediuzzaman Said Nursi does that in a masterful way, in a way that is really pure digested food, nutrition, right? It is the Risale-i Nur, therefore, is the product of a true realization of the reality as reality is under the guidance of the Qur'an, which the author attains through a sincere intellectual and spiritual struggle. Right? It doesn't just come, right? I mean, there's a lot that comes, but it comes in response to his sincerity, in response to his openness to reality, in response to his struggle with his self, lower soul. So that struggle is first with his own compulsive soul, and then with the suspicions and misguidance of positivist and this positivist and self-indulgent age. And that is why it is very important that we take the Risale-i Nur seriously. It is refracted from the Qur'an with the challenges of this positivist and self-indulgent age in mind. The tremendousness of that reality, right? We are talking about the Qur'an being a book of reality, book describing us, defining us, guiding us to reality. The tremendousness of that reality, as illuminated by the Qur'an, reflects on the Risale-i Nur. This is the main secret of the Risale-i Nur, right? It reflects that light that comes from the Qur'an. Nursi does not waste a single word in the Risale-i Nur. Therefore, it's very difficult to translate. I have been involved in translation of the Risale-i Nur for a long time now. It is very difficult to translate because there is not a single word that is put in there as a filler, right? It's very precise. He has a lot to impart to his students. And because he has so much to impart to his students, he is not going to waste words. He writes in a concise and tightly packed narrative that enables multiple layers of understanding in accordance with the reader's intellectual as well as spiritual preparedness. And this is very important too. His audience was, his first rank audience was the uninitiated peasants and small townspeople. Right? And they had a benefit in the Risale-i Nur. But that does not mean that it was like a children's book written for children only. It is packed, and it enables multiple layers of understanding. So scholars who become professors of, say, Quranic exegesis or the prophetic traditions or usul al-fiqh and so on and so forth in Muslim scholarly institutions, in the madrasas, they take the Risale-i Nur and they benefit from the Risale-i Nur. They benefit at a higher level, right? But the uninitiated audiences also benefit. Now, what should this have to do with us? Assume that we are all uninitiated beginners. I am. Well, I read once, and now I'm not uninitiated any longer. I have benefited. My level of understanding has been elevated to some extent. Then I come back and I read again. Now there are new openings. Then I come back and read again. Still new openings. Right? So the more a person reads the Risale-i Nur, the more their preparedness increases, enabling them to come back to the Risale-i Nur and discover new meanings and pathways to realization in it. Therefore, sincere readers of the Risale-i Nur maximize the benefits of engaging this blessed commentary by reading it not just once, but continually and repeatedly. Inshallah, we had and we will have again an episode on how to read the Risale-i Nur and we can talk more about this over there, right? But the Risale-i Nur is not a book to be read once and assume that you have understood it. Yes, you have understood it, but there is more to be understood because you did not have the preparation that you needed to understand some higher levels of reality and discussion that is in there when you first came to it. Now that you read once, now you're prepared, come back and you'll have more. And then come back and you'll have more. And then come back and you'll have more. Right? It is like the Qur'an. The Qur'an is like that. We never get tired of reading the Qur'an. We never cease to receive effusions from the Qur'an. We cannot exhaust the Qur'an. And the Risale-i Nur is like that because it is a reflection of the Qur'an. It's a commentary on the Qur'an. It's not any book. It is a commentary on the Qur'an, and therefore you can keep coming back. And it is not a commentary on the Qur'an in a formal sense, in the sense of formalities like grammatical rulings and so on and so forth. It's not a commentary on the Qur'an in the sense of synthesizing other commentaries. No, it is a commentary on the Qur'an. If you think of the Qur'an as a book, as the book of reality, and the Risale-i Nur as a commentary that receives its illumination from the Qur'an in order to understand reality. So if you think of it as a book of reality too. Now, some detail about the Risale-i Nur's methodology. We said that Ustad Nursi follow the pedagogical method in order to make those realities available to his students, right? So what is that? Ustad Nursi's students, as we mentioned, refer to him as Ustad, meaning a teaching master. So he was a teaching master. He was teaching. He was writing for irshad, right? He was writing for irshad. Now, the secret of this is that he was writing for irshad, providing rightful guidance, first and foremost to his own self, own lower soul. We all have lower souls, and all of our lower souls are distracted and straying away in one way or another. He was first trying to provide irshad to his own lower soul, and the sincerity that emerges from this, right, is the secret for why the Risale-i Nur became a book of irshad for everybody. So among Ustad Nursi's teaching methods is tamsil or tamthil in Arabic. That is the use of representations, comparisons, or parables to explain complex ideas and facts. Ustad Nursi takes his example in utilizing this method from the Qur'an. That's a Quranic method. You can find it all through the Qur'an. As well as from the great teaching masters of earlier times such as Mevlana Rumi and Sa'adi Shirazi, and he mentions these two by name in relation to this issue. He says, be like them, right, in articulating realities, in articulating truths. And thus, most treatises of the Risale-i Nur first bring the subject closer to the reader's understanding by setting a pattern of thought or line of argumentation through tamsil or representation, right? He tells you a story. It's a representational story. It's a parable, basically, right? And in that story, you understand the matter in a concrete sense, very easy, concrete sense. You understand how this happens in this world. Now that you understood that matter in that concrete sense, in your mind, you have a line of thinking. You have a cognitive framework, right? Then he uses that cognitive framework, that line of thinking, right? That pattern to describe or elucidate a sublime truth that could have otherwise remained too complicated or abstract or complex for the reader to comprehend. Now that you have the pattern, now you have the mold, now that you have the cognitive framework, the complex and abstract matters of that higher reality, that higher truth, fall in place. This is the method that he is using. Now, Ustad Nursi was a master of logic and logical argumentation. As I mentioned, he has two masterful works on logic in his earlier life. He used logic and logical argumentation competently in his earlier works, scholarly interactions in debates, scholarly debates, and in the Risale-i Nur too, right? But he's not going to poke it into your eye. His sharp grasp on logical argumentation undergirds his later teachings in the Risale-i Nur as well. However, he found representation to be a more powerful method in teaching, clarifying, and in some cases even proving intricate matters. Using his mastery in logic, he combines the method of deductive logic and the method of representation. And this is a deeper matter that, that can be the subject of another discussion. All we should know here is that logic undergirds, but he's not going to poke rational argumentation and its nitty-gritty into the audience's eyes. Rather, he is going to present it using representation in a way that is palatable, intelligible for everybody. So he used that logic throughout his later works. The representations of the Risale-i Nur appear to be simple and easy. He used that representational method, tafsīr, throughout his later works, and therefore the representations of the Risale-i Nur appear to be simple and easy. And sometimes people fall into this. They think that he's talking about stories, right? No, he's not talking about stories only. Those stories all are followed by really tremendous and abstract and complicated, but really important and foundational and fundamental realities. That simplicity actually reflects how well Ustad Nursi had digested and realized the vast body of Islamic knowledge that he was imparting in the Risale-i Nur. So simplicity is not a sign of superficiality. Sometimes it may be, but it is that when it comes from superficial people who don't know what they are talking about. Bediuzzaman Said Nursi was appointed to the most prestigious institute of Islamic scholarship and thought in the Ottoman Empire. He received the alias, the title Bediuzzaman, the marvel of his time, because of the sharpness of his intellect and the depth of his knowledge. He knows what he's talking about. Simplicity in his works is a sign of how he had digested knowledge, information, and providing it as pure milk. Even, milk, mother's milk, babies, newborn babies who are so sensitive, drink it and it's good for them, right? In this age, we are all like babies. We are so sensitized. Sensitized in a sense, we are desensitized because we can't recognize sins as sins, evil as evil, and so on and so forth. But we are also sensitized in the sense that we are exposed to all sorts of challenges and problems that come to faith, that our faith is as though it is hanging with a thin thread in the air, right? So he provides what he provides as pure milk. That's going to be good for everybody because he has digested it. The simplicity that is in there is a blessing from God. Now, this said, and this is also important, the Risale-i Nur does not demand blind following, right? It does not say, here is what Bediuzzaman Said Nursi said, and therefore you should take it because he's a prestigious author and a prestigious scholar and so on. No, that's not the case. It addresses the intellect and the heart. It does not demand blind following because of the scholarly authority or spiritual rank of the book's author. And this is something that is really important in our age too. This is how our minds tend to be shaped in this day and age. When we go to public school, this is how our minds are shaped. We don't like following, blind following, based on the authority of somebody. It was not the case for the longest period of time in history and in the history of Islam. People saw a sheikh, and because this sheikh was so blessed, they just took what he said or she said, right? But now our minds are messed up. So whatever argumentation is provided to us needs to address our intellects and hearts together and address them well. So the Risale-i Nur presents the intellect with convincing arguments that prove the verity of the teachings of the Qur'an and its blessed conveyor, Muhammad, the Messenger of God, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In doing this, the Risale-i Nur goes beyond synthesizing and reiterating the accomplishments of a long tradition of Islamic scholarship, right? That's not simply what it does. It does that, right? But it is not simple reiteration. It calibrates the teachings and arguments of that tradition to the challenges of the world since the scientific revolution, the age that we are living in, and resolves those challenges with sound evidence and persuasion, right? So it is not simple reiteration, it is the calibration of the tradition for us, for the minds of this day and age. Even in matters of the unseen that dialectical theologians have traditionally considered to be beyond the domain of rational argumentation, right? So kalam scholars historically have classified the things that they want to prove in two main categories. Aqliyat, things that need to be and can be proven with using the intellect, using the tools of the intellect, such as existence of God, oneness of God, necessity of prophethood, that prophets were sent, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a prophet, and sometimes the necessity of the hereafter. Other matters, right? The details of the events of the hereafter, resurrection, existence of angels, right? So on and so forth. They said these are sam'iyat, heard matters. Once you accept that the Prophet ﷺ is a prophet, everything that he says you have to take for granted, and therefore just hear them and take them. Amanna wa sadaqna. And that is true, right? But the minds, the messed up minds of the people of this day and age are not satisfied. They don't stop there. They seek evidence for all sorts of details and nitty-gritty, right? So in his contribution to the usul, the methodology of kalam, Bediuzzaman Said Nursi moves some of these issues of heard matters from the category of heard matters to rational matters. He provides rational argumentation for them too, proofs for them too. That is the contribution to the kalam tradition in a nutshell. And of course, this has lots of branches and details, but in a nutshell, right? Nevertheless, the Risale-i Nur also recognizes that what holds people off from having certainty in matters of faith, right? Why do people not believe? Why do those who do not believe do not believe? Why do people living in Muslim countries, born into Muslim families, fall out of religion? I mean, that's a horrible problem that we are facing in this day and age. In many Muslim countries and Muslim communities in non-Muslim societies, we are losing the youth. Why is this happening, right? What holds people off from having certainty in matters of faith is often not a lack of rational proofs, right? The more rational proofs you provide, don't assume that the more people will, come back to religion. No, that's not necessarily the case. Those proofs have to be there so that the intellect does not become an impediment before them, before their journey to religion, right? If you don't have the proofs, the intellect will prevent them from coming, right? But the true reason what that prevents them, right, at the end of the day, even when the proofs are there, are the weaknesses of the heart and the compulsive soul, the nafs. Therefore, the Risale-i Nur addresses the intellect, the heart, and the nafs, the compulsive soul, simultaneously. And this is also very important. The audience is not just the heart, right? It does not say, those who have not tasted, those who have not traveled the path cannot understand this matter. Let them stay outside the room. We are going to have a colloquy. We are going to have a discourse with those who have a share from the taste of spiritual matters and so on. So no, he does not say that. The Risale-i Nur does not say that. The Risale-i Nur is there to provide irshad, rightful guidance to everybody. Therefore, it addresses the intellect, the heart, and the compulsive soul simultaneously with a careful pedagogical approach, building things gradually, right? Using representations. First, it activates the imagination. With the method of representation, both to guide the heart gently to a sound position and to demonstrate to the compulsive soul that true happiness and satisfaction in this world and in the hereafter lie in having certainty in faith and living accordingly. So it addresses the heart, right, and guides it to a sound position, oftentimes using the intellect to access the heart, right? But what about the compulsive soul? What does it want? The compulsive soul wants, pleasure and comfort and ease and so on and so forth. So it addresses the compulsive soul too. It sits down, sees the compulsive soul in front of it and talks to it gently but forcefully, showing it that true pleasure, true happiness, true comfort in this world and the hereafter, not only in the hereafter, but in this world and the hereafter, lies in faith, lies in believing in God and his messenger and following the example that his messenger has set before us. So it does not leave the compulsive soul outside the room to be, degraded and tamed and killed. And it needs to be tamed, and but it uses this, pedagogy to tame it at an age when spiritual retreat that has conventionally been used to tame the lower soul, abstention and so on and so forth, has become almost impossible to implement. Right now, those who tame their compulsive souls through exposure to this pedagogy, right, understand the value in that further training and abstention and so on and so forth, and they get there too through the Risale-i Nur, right? Bediuzzaman Said Nursi himself had a life of abstinence and frugality, and that's the example that he set for his students, right? But the starting point is different. Now, that was the first aspect of this pedagogy, that the addressing the heart, the intellect, and the compulsive soul simultaneously, right? Another aspect, the Risale-i Nur empowers its readers with certainty in the truths of faith and religion without exposing them to false alternatives to which one's compulsive soul may incline. And we already talked about this, right? It is not following the methodology of the conventional kalam tradition or kalam books. It is not listing 10 false points and then refuting 10 false points in order to supposedly carry one to the right position. No, it won't list you the 10 false points. It's not going to expose you to falsehood, with very few exceptions in which the proof is so powerful that the exposure of the falsehood just exposes its absurdity, right? It's not going to do that. It has a more gentle approach. It does this by focusing on the truth, right? Truth is knowledge that corresponds to reality, as opposed to various formulations of falsehood, and that is information that does not correspond to reality. While scholarly works of theology, kalam, often begin with the refutations of falsehood and then proceed to the description and proofs of the truth, treatises of the Risale-i Nur rarely employ the method of refutation. So refutation is the prime method of kalam. The Risale-i Nur rarely employs refutation. Instead, the treatises of the Risale-i Nur explain and establish the truth of faith and religion directly with a rich array of representations. So it shows you reality as reality is, and we already mentioned this, it's a repetition. It shows you reality as reality is, and if and when you are exposed to falsehood that has misunderstood reality or misrepresents reality, therefore describes reality not as reality is, you know what reality is, and you are going to be, in a sense, inoculated. You are vaccinated, right? You are, you already know reality, and therefore the misrepresentation of reality will not affect you, will not mislead you, inshallah. Another important matter that we mentioned, but I really want to emphasize, the concepts and arguments that the Risale-i Nur introduces with these representations, with this methodology, issue from and expand on a well-digested and internalized understanding of the Qur'an. The source is the Qur'an. The method is first understanding, internalizing, digesting that knowledge that comes from the Qur'an, and then articulated it in that digested pure form. As such, the concepts and arguments that the Risale-i Nur introduces stand out as timeless expositions of the reality as described in the Quran by the all-knowing creator of all reality, and therefore reality as such. Thus, an uninitiated reader who studies the Risale-i Nur does not acquire encyclopedic knowledge of the philosophical or theological positions that remain antithetical to the teachings of the Quran, and so on and so forth, right? No need to do that. Why should we accumulate an encyclopedic garbage heap of falsehood? I mean, unless you are in an academic field where this is part of your job and so on and so forth, why should you do that? But unfortunately, with the ease of access to information that we have attained in the modern world, in the most modern world, like 21st century with Wikipedia and things like that, right? And with the inclination of the lower soul to derive some kind of pleasure from supposedly knowing more, but the word know here has to be understood as accumulating information, right? We tend to accumulate this garbage heap of falsehood. The more falsehood that one knows, right, the more ignorant one is. One does not become more knowledgeable by accumulating information about more, falsehood, right? So an uninitiated reader who studies the Risale-i Nur does not acquire encyclopedic knowledge of the philosophical or the kalam, theological positions that remain antithetical to the teachings of the Quran. No, they acquire knowledge of the Quran. They learn the rational as well as empirical proofs for the Quranic position on those issues. And the Quranic position is the position that's always right, because if knowledge, true knowledge is, truth is knowledge that corresponds to reality, the Quran is coming from the creator of reality, the knower of reality, right? So by reading the Risale-i Nur, its readers attain a comprehensive realization of reality. And this is the purpose. This is the gist of the matter. This is the gist of the matter. Consequently, if and when they are exposed to misleading arguments, as we mentioned, they find themselves to be fully equipped to recognize them as false and refute them on rational grounds. If they are exposed. If they are not exposed, they did not accumulate a list of garbage. They did not. What they learned is not falsehood. What they learned is reality as reality is, and that's always good. Because reality, the created reality, is our means to getting to know our Lord. And our purpose here is to know our Lord. So the more we know reality as imprints of creation, God's work, the more we fulfill our task in this existence. So that's all good. But we need to do it without having to be exposed to falsehood. And that's what the Risale-i Nur does. Now, this is all about what makes sense. And this all makes sense, and it is all about what makes sense. But there's one other issue that is really important. The Risale-i Nur is a blessed work. It carries the blessings of the divine inspiration that its author received from the Qur'an by God's leave. As a result, decades of experience shows that Bediuzzaman Said Nursi died in 1960. His life is sealed. We know his life from beginning to end, and we know the impact of his life, and we know the impact of his work, right? Decades of experience shows that those who read the Risale-i Nur with a sincere intention and those who persevere to understand it are moved to action. So it's not just that you accumulate knowledge, but a sign of true knowledge is that when you are filled with it, it's like a cup that fills, and if you pour more, it pours over, right? When you have true knowledge, you are moved to action. You want to share it. You want to act upon it. And those who read the Risale-i Nur, go around the world and find sincere readers of the Risale-i Nur and observe them. You will see that these are all people of action. In one way or another, you will see this urge to do something, right? To act upon that knowledge and to share it with others. As a sign of the knowledge that fills their hearts from their exposure to the Quranic light that refracts through the Risale-i Nur, they feel an urge. They feel an urge to share and spread that knowledge. But what is the method? What are the guidelines in doing that? What are the guidelines in sharing and spreading that knowledge? Right? Because sometimes people will be exposed to knowledge and they will want to share it, but because they don't have the foundations, the guidelines about how that should be done, they do more harm than good. And this can be possible with the half-time readers of the Risale-i Nur too, and it has happened with the half-time readers of the Risale-i Nur too. Right? This is a book that needs to be read with sincerity, understanding, perseverance, continually, devotion. Right? But if you take just a piece of the Risale-i Nur and assume that you got it, and you omit and neglect the whole package, right? The holistic nature of the package, you will err, right? And what you do when you do that is you are abusing the Risale. You are abusing this light that God has blessed us with in the age that we are living in, right? So the Risale-i Nur therefore provides guidelines about how to share and spread that knowledge, spread that message too, right? And in a nutshell, Ustad Nursi calls this positive action. Positive action, musbet hareket in Turkish, right? Haraka ithbatiye, maybe. Anyway, positive action. That is an underlying principle of the Risale-i Nur and the method of the Risale-i Nur. It's a long subject, but we can try to summarize it in a few principles. And these are the principles. First, to act with confidence in and devotion to one's own cause and not be reactive in a world of fleeting conflicts. There are always conflicts. Open the news, listen to it, there will be a conflict about something today, and a month from now there will be another conflict about something else. People are always thinking and struggling with each other and so on and so forth. If you keep reacting to things, you will never be grounded. You will never find your find the foundation on which you will ground your feet, right? This is about reality as reality is. This is from the source of the source of all knowledge. This is from the, this is refracted, this is refracted from the source of all true knowledge that is provided to humanity at its best form, in its best form. This is refracted from the Qur'an, right? So act with confidence in and devotion to one's own cause and not be reactive in a world of fleeting conflicts. Don't deal with what other people are doing or saying, right? You focus on understanding, acting upon, and representing truth. Second, to move deliberately and peacefully with consideration for the well-being of all and with mercy for all. This, like, mercy and compassion is an underlying, really underlying principle in Bediuzzaman Said Nursi's work. And also pure justice, adāla mahdha, sort of pure justice is something that really underlines Bediuzzaman Said Nursi's work. Pure justice requires that you don't harm those who are innocent in order to punish or chastise or discipline those who are not innocent, right? So you think first and foremost about the weakest, the most vulnerable, the downtrodden, the most disadvantaged. You put those first, and you think about their well-being first and foremost, right? And you look at them and everybody else, of course, with mercy and compassion, and you move in a tactful, deliberate way, in a peaceful way, because when peace goes away, oppression comes, and it is those weak, downtrodden, disadvantaged who are hurt and harmed most when this happens. I mean, look what happened in the Muslim world in the past, 10 plus years after the revolutions of the Arab Spring. It was all done with good intentions, but what did it bring down, right? So deliberately, with tact, with compassion for the broader masses, for the weak, and peacefully under all circumstances. And to focus only on presenting the truth and representing it in good character. For while it is unto man to make an effort, success and guidance are from God alone, right? So we focus on our task. Our task is to understand, act upon, represent truth with good character in a way that God demands from us, right? But we do not focus on the consequences. We do not focus on the outcome. Outcome belongs to God. When we do something for God's sake, what we acquire from that is in accordance with our intention and God's will to reward us in return for that, right? We may do something with the wrong intention and it may result in an outcome like billions of people listen to us and are moved by what we do. But if we did that with the wrong intention, we don't acquire anything from it. But then we do something and nobody listens to us. Maybe one person listens to us. One person benefits from it. Maybe nobody benefits from it. But it's up to God to give us the reward. We focus on our task. We don't get involved in God's part. The outcome belongs to God, right? We focus on our part, and that is the underlying principle and secret of sincerity, right? And sincerity is an underlying aspect of positive action. And once again, positive action is the method of spreading, sharing, and spreading true knowledge that we learn from the Risale-i Nur. Okay, I know that this has been a long episode. We are probably in an hour and 20 minutes or something like that. But I tried to do it in one sitting, and inshallah it will be of benefit. In the next episode we will talk about how to read the Risale-i Nur, and then inshallah we will move on to our where we left left in reading the Risale-i Nur before we started these video series. Once again, please subscribe on YouTube. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Please share if there's anything to be corrected. Please share your feedback so that we can make this better. Please spread the word, share the links to these episodes so that everybody out there can benefit from this blessed source of knowledge that we have in this day and age. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر الدعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.